Chapter 26. Tension in Paradise, the Mentor's Mistake. Kanahagakure. Streets. District A is clear, over. A voice crackled over a transceiver, a status report for the superior officers in charge of overseeing the delicate operation. District B, thinning out over here. District C, main procession has arrived. The people are quiet, recommend moving the subject now, it's the shortest distance to the court. The captain grunted, weighing his options. Sure, it was the shortest route, but the people were centering around this area as soon as they caught wind of what was going on. If they walked the prisoner in, it would be hell with the chaotic crowds. Sir? Do we have permission to move the subject through District C to reach the Hokage building? The man sighed and reached for the mic under his mask, tapping it to speak. Roger that, squads 1 to 3 will take the flanks and hold back the crowds, while squad 4 walks the prisoner through. Squads 5 and 6 will take rooftop duty, watch the crowds for anything suspicious, and always stay in the lead. The man stood up from his seat within an armored carriage, his men followed suit. His cloak was white, signifying his superior rank over his 3 men of black cloaks. Their animal masks signified their place as the elite of Konoha, the Anbu. The room was dark, only small slits where the armor did not cover allowed the early evening sunset to flow through, casting an orange light on them. With them was one man, chained to the floor of the small sitting room where they stood. He was wearing a white straitjacket, the sleeves unhooked only to allow his arms to be chained to the floor. Instead of his usual leaf headband covering his sharingan, a special black eye patch was hanging over it to prevent chakra from escaping. The one amenity they allowed him to have was keeping his usual blue face mask, it covered his sullen, gloomy frown. Kakashi sighed lightly as the carriage transporting him to his trial stopped, making the Anbu move to either side of him. They went through a few seals, and his bindings were released only for 2 of them to quickly hook his arms back into locking positions on his chest. They gave him a somewhat preferential treatment, seeing as how he was once an Anbu himself. Kakashi-senpai, are you ready? Kakashi had long since signed his own fate, he was prepared to face the consequences. Yes Tenzo, let's get this over with. I want to see what they really think of me. A traitor? Martyr? Believer in peace? It doesn't matter anymore though. Yamato cringed at how broken Kakashi acted, he had lost hope in Konoha, just as Tenzo was beginning to feel. He nodded regardless and indicated for 2 men to hold Kakashi on either side of him, while he and another walk in front and back. As they moved in position, he requested another report from the men stationed outside. Squads 1 through 3 in position. Outside the armored carrier, over a dozen Anbu and Jonin were holding back at the rowdy and chaotic crowds. Squads 5 and 6 in position. Ready on your go. The 8 Anbu he had ordered on the rooftops remained hidden, their shadows bathed in the sunset. Roger, we are opening the casket. Yamato gripped the door and pulled hard to move the steel-armored vehicle. As soon as the door was open, Yamato was met with screams from the crowd and the occasional object thrown at the vehicle. He waved over his shoulder to indicate them to move forward, and he dropped to the ground along the short dirt street. If one looked from where he was standing, they could easily make out the large red Hokage building. Kakashi was gently pushed out of the transport and looked into the eyes of the crowd, hoping to see someone he knew. The majority of the jeers came from the civilian population, while many of the shinobi looked equally disgusted with him. He couldn't see Sakura, however, he could see Asuma and Kurenai in the crowds. Their faces were indifferent, but he could see just how much they thought him a fool. I suppose that no one will ever understand. Let's move out. The 2 began to push him along the dirt path. With little else to do, Kakashi subjected himself to their verbal attacks. You traitor. How could you do something like this to Konoha? Who the hell do you think you are? You're just like your useless father. That one hit Kakashi right in his heart, he didn't know who said it, but it was enough. A tear fell from the man's eyes as he reflected on his father. In the end, he learned his father's lesson the hard way by losing Obito, yet he was never able to forgive his father because of his death. Now to see the people comparing him to his father, it was too much to bear. Taichu, we are halfway there. The Hokage and her retinue are waiting at the entrance. The rooftop squads reported in their location. Roger that, keep your eyes on the crowd, I'm expecting someone to try something. Roger. Kakashi's revealed eye was dull, it had lost all of its hope. He already knew he was a dead man walking, the Hokage would be overtaken by her counselors. With their militant ways, they would order him executed for what he had done. I hope Naruto makes use of what I was able to give him, if he doesn't, then all this was for nothing. As Kakashi approached the Hokage Tower, the activity became more frenzied as more people tried to steal a peek at the criminal. A few objects were thrown at him, immediately batted away by the flanking Anbu. No matter what Kakashi did short of killing a fellow Leaf Shinobi, the Anbu would always respect him for his service. "Sir, I think I see someone in the crowd moving towards the subject. We may have a problem here." Yamato stopped walking and began to look around for the attacker. "I don't see him, what does he look like?" The Anbu looked around, weary of the danger presented. "There he is. It's a boy, he is running down the street." Yamato looked and finally saw the would-be assassin, a genin with a kunai. The Anbu went through hand signs and captured the boy with a wooden pillar. It wrapped around his stomach and held his arms in place. He struggled against his bonds, futilely of course. Kakashi looked at the boy, no older than his genin team was when he first met them. He was crying, but his eyes were full of fiery hate all directed towards him. "Please take this boy off." Yamato was interrupted by a loud yell from the boy. It sounded like he said no. "I looked up to you, Kakashi-san. I thought you were the coolest ninja in the village. I hope to have you as my sensei. How could you side with a traitor to the village? How could you pick him over us?" Kakashi's eyes widened in surprise from the boy's accusation. The crowd grew quiet as they wanted to hear Kakashi's response. The silver-haired jonin sighed and hung his head low. He didn't want to hurt the kid's feelings. In reality, he was quite honored that the boy had him in such high esteem. "Kid. I don't know what to tell you. I do love this village, contrary to what everyone here believes. If I was to go against Naruto, how could I call myself a sensei? How could I consider myself a believer of the will of fire? Whether people will believe what I say or not, it doesn't matter. No matter what, we can't break the bonds of those who have come before, because of those bonds are what make this village strong." The crowd gasped at his fervent speech, and gossip followed as the Anbu began to pull Kakashi towards the building. The boy was quiet, having been left behind by Yamato's entourage. He reflected on what the jonin said and found that he was right, even if it was hard to see. While he couldn't see it from a teacher's point of view, as a ninja of Konoha, anyone could see that Kakashi did what he did with the village in mind. If he had attacked the Yuzu shinobi, war would be upon them, and he would betray his friend. With embarrassment and shame in his heart, the boy trudged home to continue to ponder on what Kakashi had to say. Arriving at the Hokage building, the small group found a few important figures waiting for them outside. Sanada stood there, her Hokage hat hiding most of her face and obscuring her frown. She had her arms crossed and looked impatient. Sakura and Shizune stood behind her as her entourage, both looked nervous and fidgety with the serious atmosphere. Koharu and Homura were last. Their stern scowls were meant to pierce Kakashi with fear, when in reality he was not fazed or surprised one bit. "No one looks too happy to see me, no surprise," Kakashi thought with a sigh. "Now that you have finally arrived, we can get down to business." Homura growled with an angry tone, and Koharu nodded in agreement. Sanada turned around and began to walk inside of the building. A wave over her shoulder indicated they follow, and everyone soon turned and entered. With little choice, Kakashi was dragged inside behind the Hokage and taken to a large meeting room used for important village gatherings. Everyone is a bit tense because the Fire Lord is here to oversee the trial. Yamato muttered to his friend Kakashi, whose eyes widened upon the thought of the Fire Lord listening to the trial. "Crap, if he is here then that doesn't spell anything good for Konoha. I don't like leaving a problem behind. If they are going to kill me, I don't want it to affect the village. Let's go, better to not keep the daimyo waiting." Sanada ordered as everyone sat in their assigned seats, while the Anbu dragged Kakashi to stand before a large sitting pedestal. This was where Tsunade, Homura, and Koharu would sit and rule over the trial. Kakashi heard something and looked to his left to see a door open and many samurai and politicians come out. He easily spied the Fire Lord in the crowd, his headdress easily taller than anyone else. He made to sit down on a cushion off to the side of the trial, not really being involved, but not completely inactive either. The lights dimmed so Kakashi was alone under a spotlight, and Tsunade could just barely be seen from the edge of it. The blonde woman was not happy, of course. This was something Kakashi was suspecting. It was obvious she was very disappointed in him, as was the rest of the village. He had given up trying to persuade people though. He was ready for his final punishment. "Hataka Kakashi, you have been brought to trial today under the charges of treason against the Leaf Village and acting against a direct order from your Hokage. How do you plead?" Kakashi met her hazel eyes with his black one. It was half-lidded as usual, since Kakashi wanted to keep up his mask of indifference for the trial. "Guilty, Hokage-sama." He knew there was no point in arguing it, he had already given his speech about his reasons a dozen times by now. Sanada's frown was made even longer when she heard this, as if she was hoping he would try to argue in front of the daimyo if there was just a littlest chance for him. The Hokage glanced to her left to see Hamura slowly shake his head negatively. Next she glanced right to see Kaharu do the same negative gesture, both condemned Kakashi. Sanada internally sighed but had no choice but to reveal her choice to those assembled. With one last look to the Fire Lord, she found that the man, usually passive and neutral, was slowly shaking his head in disappointment. Very well then, Kakashi Hatake is found guilty of his crimes. Now it is time for the penalty befitting the crimes of such a magnitude. As per Law Code number 092A5, a shinobi caught with treasonous felony is to be sentenced to a public execution. You will be held within the dungeons until the scheduled date is set, and from then on you will be moved to a higher level security area to wait for your execution date. I'm sorry, Kakashi. Kakashi just shook his head at her declaration and said nothing, merely staring at the floor with his contempt and disappointment. Anbu. Take him to the detainment area, no visitors are allowed. I want a constant guard around him, no less than 4 of your best. Sanada ordered, making the special forces present jump into action and salute. Yes, ma'am. Right. The 2 men who had been moving him returned and entered the spotlight where Kakashi stood. With it being the only light on still, they dragged him into the darkness to not be seen again by those in the room. By the time the lights were brought on, all Black Ops were gone and Kakashi was gone as well. Sakura wiped a tear from her eye, and Sanada seemed to wobble every other step she took as she left. The Fire Lord sighed and got up, followed closely by his escorts. He had expected the son of the White Fang to deny the charges, the man had believed that Kakashi was innocent. To say he was surprised and to an extent disappointed was an understatement. He wondered if the man's father would be supportive or spiteful. We lose another great hero in throes of war. First our Jinchuriki willingly leaves us, next a Sannin disappears, and now this, what else could go wrong for Konoha? Uzumaki. Uzumaki compound. Inner estate. Naruto was still in his home, running late for his duty at the Uzukage Tower. He had not slept well the night before as he had unfortunately been stressing over the tension between him and his wife. Mei had yet to say anything major to him other than the necessary small talk, it was as if she was on autopilot. Naruto didn't like it, but he knew better than to push Mei. If she wanted to speak to him about something, she would speak to him about it when she was ready. Gotta go, gotta go. Naruto chanted to himself as he hurriedly placed his robes over his jonin garb and grabbed the hat on his way out of the bedroom. Coming out of his room, the blonde Kage maneuvered himself down the stairs and walked into the kitchen area. Mei was nowhere to be found, probably sitting outside with the baby. He opened the refrigerator and found some ramen that he could quickly make. He began to heat up the water and prepare the noodles while he mentally drooled over the sweet aroma. That was one great thing we got out of our trade contracts with the other nations, we can finally import ramen. It was hell to live in Kirigakura without this stuff, Yuzu is definitely a paradise in comparison. Naruto grabbed some chopsticks after the few minutes wait and dug into his pork ramen, savoring the flavor. He was seated at the island counter of his kitchen area, where both the dining room and kitchen interlocked. The bodyguards assigned to him were sticking to the shadows this morning, a subtle change to their usual tactics. I guess the tension has gotten to them as well, I really hope it all blows over soon. I really don't feel as happy as my usual self with Mei and her moody attitude. It hasn't been this bad since Rashi was first found out about, I thought I was going to lose my head a dozen times back then. Uzukage-sama, shouldn't you be going soon? Naruto sighed and looked over his shoulder to find one of the hurricanes revealing themselves to him. Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking a little too much. Naruto got up from his seat and threw the container of ramen away. He adjusted his hat and made it so that he could still see while keeping the sun's glare from his face. He and his 6 shadows left the house to find Mei sitting on a bench on the porch. She noticed him and waved goodbye before going back to rocking Rashi. He noticed the nice breeze and figured it was good for them both to get a little sun on such a nice day. Goodbye, Mei. I shouldn't be too long today, so maybe we can do something fun when I get off. Naruto suggested to the redhead only to have her shake her head. Don't worry about me, Naruto, just focus on your work. We need a strong leader right now more than ever, don't think about taking off a little early just to be with me, I won't have any of that. She warned, causing the Kage to frown. But Mei, we really should have a little time to ourselves. Besides, I really think we should talk. He was interrupted by Mei, who obviously didn't want the conversation to go any farther. Aren't you late, Uzumaki-sama? You really should get going. Rashi and I aren't going anywhere, so you don't have to worry. Naruto sighed and nodded, leaving the two while his bodyguards followed him out of the inner compound and into the main Uzumaki clan housing district. Naruto turned around to see the gate close, and he immediately became serious. His bodyguards felt his chakra pulse, and suddenly a squad of black ops were kneeling before him in the middle of the street. Naruto observed the anbu he had requested, nodding to himself in confidence with them. The leader, a woman with fiery red hair and the mask of a wild cat, looked up at him with hidden eyes. Yes, Uzumaki-sama? Naruto smiled as he saw Sugihara was already back on the job, even after the painful loss of her teammates. Cat, your squad has a special mission from me today. Usually I would have my hurricanes do it, but I want them with me for now. The anbu looked amongst each other, wondering what could be so important that he would allow them the honor of doing it. Anything, Shadai-sama, we will complete your mission flawlessly. Just tell us the details. Naruto tipped his hat to a passerby in respect as they were watching the interaction before turning back to Sugihara. I want you to keep an eye on my wife and child for the day. You see, she has been acting strangely since I arrived, and I'm afraid I can't figure out the reason why. Don't bother interacting or showing yourself to her, only do so if she is in danger of any kind. Just observe and alert me of anything wrong, understood? Sugihara was surprised the Kage was actually considering doubting his wife of her loyalty, but she could not argue with the matriarch's strange twist in behavior. Also, I want you to ask around the compound and see if you can't find out if anything strange happened while we were in snow. If I can find out something like that, I'm sure I can get everything squared away. Sugihara and her squad nodded, they wouldn't fail the Uzukage. Yes sir, we understand our mission. Consider it done. Naruto smiled at how reliable the squad leader was and nodded. I also would like to apologize in advance now since I'm bothering you all with my personal problems. I'm just worried is all. Please take good care of them while I'm gone. Naruto and his men disappeared, leaving Sugihara's squad to disperse and take up positions around the inner estate. Mei had watched Naruto go, with little spoken, except for a few harsh parting words. She again berated herself for her unnecessary way of speaking, but couldn't take anything back. It was only a matter of time, she told herself, until Naruto found out what she was keeping from him. There was no doubt the monkeys would get into contact with him somehow, and then Mei would be seen as the evil one for keeping it from him. What else can I do though? Naruto is so stubborn about everything he does, and at the same time, he is always concerned with his family's well-being. Maybe if I told him first, it would be better. Later today then, I'll go visit him in the tower. Mei thought to herself, glad she was actually taking the first step in working out the problem. She realized that Naruto was afraid of her changed personality. In reality, she couldn't really blame him. In retrospect, she had always been quite chipper when around him. It was his aura of happiness of course that really led her to act that way, but now that he had grown up some, his maturity brought out a new light in her as well. She now felt as if she could speak freely of the world and its problems to Naruto and receive an accurate and thought-out reply from him. Really, all she wanted was for her and Naruto to live happily, but with his level of smarts, there was bound to be conflicts between them with differing opinions. He of course would think that the training would be beneficial and throw caution to the wind with the dangers. That is something I cannot stand, I have already lost so much, I don't want to lose him too. Right now though, I am only hurting the both of us by keeping the problem secret. I would actually be happier if we were at least yelling at each other, at least we would be speaking. Mei suddenly felt four presences take up spots around her, and she tensed. Looking around with the naked eye, she could see nothing. Of course, being a Kage-level shinobi and once the Mizukage, Mei was not to be outsmarted by the novices. Feeling for the chakra sources, Mei could make out the location of the first two, while the others were too far away for her relatively weak sensor abilities. Anbu Black Ops, Naruto must have sent them. Why would he do that though? Has my acting really gotten him that concerned? I don't really feel that well. She suddenly thought as she stood up and took Rashi into the house. Sugihara had seen how the woman had tensed when they moved into position and knew they were discovered. It was a tough job to spy on someone in the first place when they were once a Kage, all but impossible. The Anbu captain wasn't fazed though, as long as they didn't interfere with her routine, she felt as though the matriarch wouldn't mind. I'm beginning to wonder though if Naruto was expecting something to really happen. I had better keep my eyes peeled. The other member of her team that was on watch duty, a young man with a wolf mask and gray hair, looked at her from his vantage point, a tree. Sugihara had chosen to cloak herself with a simple light bending technique and was crouched on the wall of the inner estate. She uncloaked for a moment to wave a finger at the house and then disappeared again when he nodded. The Mizukage may not like it, but Sugihara wasn't going to give up that easily. Uzumaki. Uzumaki Compound. Anbu Team 3. Jakaru and Kame. So, what are we supposed to be doing again? One of the Anbu asked his partner with the turtle mask, curious of what their mission was. His partner sighed, bringing a hand to his mask's forehead in frustration. He asked himself why he was partnered with such a person, but filed it away for later, instead focusing on the mission given to them by the Uzukage. Didn't you listen to the Uzukage? He wants us to interrogate. Speak to. The man flinched by the sudden reproach by his partner, the jackal mask chuckled. You spend too much time with the interrogation corps, the Uzukage asked us to interview the citizens, not torture them. The turtle mask recoiled again and had his anger spike a bit in annoyance. So you knew what he said anyway? Then why would you ask me? He hissed as they approached one of the houses nearby the inner compound. Because it's funny to get you riled up. He responded simply before turning his head from his partner towards the door and knocking gently. For the fifth time today, the turtle-masked man sighed over his partner and crossed his arms in impatience as the person said nothing. Jackal knocked again and was rewarded with a bitter reply of "I'm coming." The two exchanged cursory glances before turning back towards the open door. An old man, his red hair long turned gray, stood there surveying the two in their uniform. "Anbu Black Ops, what do you want?" he asked with a gruff, no-nonsense voice. For being in his 60s, the man looked very fit. He stood straight and had a well-built frame and a tough, gritty face that looked quite hostile towards the two shinobi. The two again exchanged glances before Jackal crossed his arms and began to speak in his usual confident tone. "Sir, we have been ordered to investigate about anything odd occurring near the Uzukage's home last week. You see, his wife has been acting a bit strange and he is concerned something happened while he was away. Any information you have would be much." Jackal was interrupted by an annoyed growl by the older man. "I didn't see anything worth noting. Now is this interview done?" Jackal sighed and Turtle decided it was his turn to step up. "Sir, we don't need your hostility. We are only trying to do our jobs as peacefully as we can to help the Uzukage. Now can you please?" The man laughed, a hollow mocking tone to it that sent both the Anbu into confusion. "Are you too new to being Black Ops or what?" he asked with a not-so-friendly or questioning tone. "Please, can you? Aren't you supposed to beat me up until I say something, get the information at whatever the cost? I was once a shinobi, you know, back in Kiri. You Anbu are ruthless, I have no reason to speak to you." Jackal and Turtle looked at one another before shrugging. "Sir, we may be new to the Black Ops forces, but we are not new to being shinobi. We both respect you for once being a ninja yourself, so surely you can understand why we don't wish to act in such a way that could be viewed as harsh when we don't need to. All we are asking for is your cooperation." Jackal said, not allowing his blunt and easily angered partner to speak. Now was the time for subtle diplomacy. "Ha! You can think of me as an old bastard with a grudge, but whenever I see an animal mask, I want to spit on its wearer. I watched as my family was killed in the massacres by Kiri Anbu. The only reason I'm not dead is because that bastard Yugura allowed some bloodline shinobi to live if they served in the corps. So please, excuse if I'm impolite to say that I don't want to speak to you." Turtle was about to explode. He took a threatening step towards the man as he breathed heavily. He smirked. "So it is true, you feel angry, don't you? Want to hit me, knowing that the Uzukage wouldn't do a damn thing about it?" Just when Jackal thought the man would continue to pick fun at his partner even more, Turtle surprised them both by taking off his mask and revealing his annoyed face. "You see this?" He pointed to his face, at first confusing his partner and the man in front of him. "As you can see, we Anbu aren't just animal masks or cold killers. We have faces and we have names, and I think my partner and I would appreciate if you would at least show us the respect of a human being to another. Now are you going to help or should we just speak to your neighbor?" The man recoiled and Jackal thought that Turtle may have pushed him a bit far. They were both surprised when the man smiled, a real smile. "Well, I guess Yuzu's shinobi have some backbone. At least you are willing to show me your face." Those bastards in Kiri were able to hide their emotions behind those masks, as if they weren't the real murderers. "Take them off and go back to your family as an innocent man, yeah right. I respect you, kid, that took a lot of guts." Jackal uncrossed his arms and pressed the man for the real reason they were there. So, did anything unusual happen last week? The man brought a hand to his chin in thought before he suddenly remembered something. Oh yes. A lava monkey came through here and entered the compound. You could hear his heavy footfalls a mile away. The two black ops looked at one another and nodded. Thank you, sir. That was all we needed to know. The two disappeared, and the man watched their blurs head for the main house of the compound. Maybe it's time I finally let go of the old grudge. Maybe, just maybe, Yuzu's got something different than Kiri ever did. A heart maybe? Uzumaki compound. Inner estate. I see, so are you sure? Sugihara asked the two Anbu after they gave her their report. Yes ma'am, I don't see any reason why he would lie to us. Turtle noted and Jackal just nodded. Cat took a moment to think, and Jackal took the time to ask her something. So how's your job coming along, Captain? Sugihara looked up and then sighed, hiking a thumb over her shoulder to a window where they could see Mei with the child on a couch. She knows we are watching her, so nothing really is new. I'm afraid that if the Uzukage expected to learn something by watching her, it isn't going to happen, not today at least. It would probably be best if you two headed out immediately and reported your findings to the Uzukage himself. Once you are done, come back here and join with us in watching. The two nodded and leaped out of the tree where the captain and her subordinate were watching. Wait. Is she really going to? Nice. She turned her attention back to her partner and found him leaning forward. She looked to see Mei undoing her uniform to breastfeed the baby and realized that Snake was a pervert. You idiot. She slapped the back of his head and he fell to the ground with a dull thump. His fall kicked up dirt and made his face ache from slamming into his mask. Mei smirked as the Anbu was slapped out of the tree and fixed her shirt back to normal. She had already fed Rashi before Naruto left. She had been bidding on one of them being a pervert. Looks like she was right and she got a little giggle out of it too. Rashi, seeing his mother laugh, also began to chuckle, and they both shared a little laugh at the expense of the Anbu. Uzumaki. Uzukage Tower. Naruto soon arrived at his building and received the latest stack of papers to read over. His secretary, a kind girl from the Hyo clan with long flowing black hair, was nice enough to bring them up to him personally. He thanked her graciously, knowing the long walk it could be for civilians. Let's see here. Looks like the council wishes to adjust tariffs with some independent cities within Fire Country. Approved. I don't see why not, considering they are taking a big risk by trading with us. Naruto said to himself with a nod as he grabbed his stamp and slammed it down onto the paper. What's next? This is the ordinance I requested. Looks like it passed. Just need my signature for final verification. Naruto was speaking of his history for all edict that made sure all teachers would equally include each major and minor clan's history within the school curriculum. Just because they lived in the land of the Uzumaki did not mean that the Hyo and Ranmaru had to forget their traditions and past. They deserved to be known and heard just as much as the history of the Uzumaki. Best part was that I wasn't even pressured by the clan heads. I'm sure they will be happy to find this out. Naruto took out his pen and wrote his name at the bottom of the small form, declaring the law into effect. Naruto continued like this for another half an hour, just absently reading over the papers and approving or denying them depending on his own views. The hurricanes quietly remained in the shadows, content with just watching the Uzukage work. It wasn't long until he felt a few chakra presences coming towards his office and felt a slight gust of wind blow through the office. He turned around to the window to find two Anbu seamlessly enter through and close the window, bowing to him. Uzukage-sama. They announced, waiting to be acknowledged in case he was addressing something important upon their arrival. Naruto smiled and stood up, glad to see something new from the monotony of his work. He got their attention and raised his hand up to indicate for them to stand. They looked at one another and shrugged before standing face to face with the Uzukage. Yes, what can I do for you? You are from Team 3, Sugihara's group from this morning? The two nodded to his question and relayed their information to Naruto. To say he was surprised was an understatement. However, what confused him is exactly why a lava monkey came to his home and why Mei would act so strangely after a visit from one. A lava monkey, you say? That is strange indeed, but I wonder, what could it have done to make my wife have such a sour mood? The two Anbu looked at their leader and thought to come up with ideas. Maybe it attacked her or provoked her into a bad mood. Suggested Turtle, leading to a hard gaze from his leader, instantly quieting him. The lava monkeys are not like that, they have the utmost respect for the people of this island. I hate to say they play favorites, but I would even go so far as to claim they love the Uzumaki over all of everyone. I highly doubt they would try and provoke her for some reason. Jackal had been racking his brain for a while before deciding to speak up. Maybe it spoke to her about something sensitive, something she didn't want to hear? I mean, you two are the clan heads of the Uzumaki. If they had a problem or had to inform someone with news, then you would be the first ones to speak to, right? Naruto considered it, figuring it sounded about right. Yes, that could be the reason. While they haven't contacted us before, I can't say I would be surprised if that was their reason for being there. However, what confuses me is just what would the lava monkey have to say that would make Mei so angry? Well, I suppose that is for me to figure out, right? Can't ask you guys to do everything or else I wouldn't be Kage, right? He said jokingly, earning a few chuckles from the two men. Thank you for bringing this information to me. I'll go address the problem right away. Have you heard anything about my wife? How is the observation going? The two looked at each other and then back at Naruto. Well, apparently the captain realized that Mei-sama had caught on to our spying and was intentionally doing nothing. There was little to report, sir. Naruto sighed and rubbed his forehead, figuring that something like that would happen with hindsight. Yes, I suppose it would be difficult to keep your presence hidden from a former Kage. Alright, good job nonetheless. Be sure to pass on my thanks to the captain when you two head back. I'm going to. Naruto was interrupted when he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The two Anbu looked at each other confusedly and saw 6 previously unknown figures appear out of nowhere. They scrambled around the desk and room to try and figure out what just happened to the Uzukage. Hurricanes, aren't they the bodyguards to the Uzukage? Where the hell did he go? What happened to Uzukage-sama? Asked one of them out loud, frantic over the sudden disappearance. I don't know, it was as if he just up and left. It didn't seem like he was the one to do it either. He was interrupted mid-sentence. Suggested another as the two Anbu scratched their heads in confusion. Seeing them still standing there, one of the Hurricanes spoke. You may head back to your squad. Your mission is still top priority to the Uzukage. We will find out where he went. In the meantime, if you should need to report to anyone, go to the Anbu general. Understood? The two nodded and saluted before disappearing in a blur. Uzukage-sama, where did you go? Yuzu Island. Rain Forest. Haven of Primates. Naruto reappeared in mid-air and landed summarily on his rear end. He had felt a sudden pull on his body while in the office and felt himself get taken somewhere else within the blink of an eye. Looking around, Naruto noticed that he was now within the rain forest. Not just that, but within the trees were multiple huts and bridges interconnecting them. Where the hell am I? Is this where the lava monkey populace lives? Naruto wondered to himself as he began to see red fur swinging through the trees or peek out a window. He suddenly noticed he was not alone and found himself in the middle of a formation of rocks. Looking closer, he noticed they were in some sort of pattern, as if they were a seal of some sort. He saw a few lava monkeys, including Yamara, standing to one side where he could only guess was the start. Hello, Naruto-sama. I'm glad to see that the reverse summoning was a success. It has been quite some time since we last attempted it. He spoke to the confused Kage, a hearty smile on his features as he was quite glad with the success. Naruto looked at the other monkeys and saw that they all had 3 tails and their backs were covered in crimson fur. They had serious a demeanor and they cracked no smiles upon his appearance as the cheerful Yamara did, setting a more serious atmosphere. Naruto stood up and brushed himself off any dirt that had gotten on his white and black robes. He took off his hat and robe and sealed them within a scroll that was tucked in his pocket. Hello Yamara, it is good to see you. Naruto said as he made his way over to the small gathering of summons to find out what was going on. Can I ask why you summoned me though? I wasn't informed of anything special going on. The gruff voice of one of the Crimsonbacks spoke. On one side of his face, he had a long scar running from the cheek to the temple, meaning he had seen battle before. Your female was stubborn, so we chose to directly speak to you instead. There is much to discuss with you, Uzumaki-sama, come with us. Naruto was confused at first until he realized that they were speaking of Mei, and he then figured he could get some answers about what exactly happened. He also took particular note to Yamara's flinch when female was mentioned, leading Naruto to believe he may have been the one to come and see Mei. They led him to a particularly tall tree and began to climb it, using their bare hands instead of chakra. Naruto chose instead to simply walk on up and followed them to a particularly large hut structure. He figured that it was their leading class met to discuss important happenings. They led him inside and had him sit on the wooden floor while they took up spots in a circle. Yamara sat next to him, while the crimsonback that first addressed him sat at the opposite end of the circle from him. So? Naruto began, wondering what was going on with the small period of awkward silence. The monkeys seemed nervous or apprehensive, and he wanted to hurry them along. Yamara, tell the human of your first attempt to relay your message. The talk with his female. The elder spoke with a particular harsh tone about his female, leading Naruto to believe that the lava monkeys may have not taken what Mei said in stride. You see, Naruto-sama, I went to speak to you at your house 7 sunsets ago. When I arrived, I was informed by Mei-sama that you were not there, and I had a conflict with myself whether to speak to her of my message or wait until you came back from your mission. My trusting side got the better of me, and I proceeded to tell your female when she became angered and ordered me to leave, to which I followed her order. Naruto's confusion and surprise was evident on his face, and the supposed leader of the group spoke up again, a certain knowing tone to his voice. It seems you were not told of this meeting by your female, I take it? Naruto turned to him and shook his head negatively. Mei never mentioned it. No, Mei never mentioned that Yamara came to visit. A few of my shinobi found out from neighbors that he had come by, but I had no idea why or what it was about. The monkey shook its head in disappointment. I see, it was as we expected. After Yamara relayed a reaction to us, we figured she would lie or deceive you to keep our news a secret. Naruto spoke up again, wondering just what the message was. What exactly was the message Yamara spoke of? What was it you wanted to tell me? The monkeys looked at one another before he answered him. Well, Uzumaki-sama, we have decided it is time for us to help strengthen you with special training. Yamara informed you of it upon your first summoning of him, if I remember correctly. Naruto thought back to that time and realized that yes, indeed, Yamara had spoken to him of something like that. Yes, I remember him saying something about it, but he didn't reveal much. I guess you guys were still on the fence about choosing me up until recently? They nodded their heads in affirmative to his question. It had taken much deliberation to see if Naruto was truly worthy to try the training. Yes, that is correct. As it is extremely difficult and very dangerous, we had to be sure that we thought you had a chance of surviving. I'm sure you can figure out why your female reacted now that you know that much. It seems that she was trying to protect you by keeping it a secret. Naruto couldn't believe it. Mei had kept it from him to protect him? I would have at least thought she would speak to me about it. I had no idea she would go to such lengths to keep me out of harm's way. Her emotional distress must have affected her more than she let on. I should go speak with her. I see. What exactly is this training? The monkey gave a smile. It was obviously happy he was at least considering it. First, allow me to introduce myself, Uzumaki-sama. I seem to have forgotten my manners. My name is Yamusha, and I am the current family leader of the lava monkeys here on Yuzu. It has been hectic for us lately as we prepared for your training, so we have been a bit stressed. However, I am glad you are at least considering it, and I hope that you may be able to speak to your female to further persuade her to the idea. While it is dangerous, your geothermal training will surely give you the edge you need in the coming battles. Those of us in this room can answer the best out of all lava monkeys, as we have gone through the first phase of the training ourselves, earning our positions as the Crimsonbacks. Please, if you would follow us to the training location, we can speak with better context. Yamura got up along with the others and followed Yamusha out of the hut and out through the jungle. Naruto felt somewhat intimidated by the sheer speed the monkeys were going at because of their excellent vine-swinging skills. He pushed himself hard to keep up and saw that they were approaching a large mountain that he had not noticed when he was exploring the island at first. Where are we going? Just what is this training? Naruto had to content xhimself with knowing his answers would come soon enough. He jumped onto another branch and kept sight of Yamara as the group headed further into the deep foliage. Uzumaki. Uzumaki compound. Mei decided that she had waited long enough and had set out to speak to Naruto. She left a kind old Uzumaki woman to look after Rashi while she left to speak to Naruto on her own. Well, not necessarily on my own. She thought with a slight grimace as the four presences were back and stronger than ever, steadily following her as she walked the dirt path through town to the Uzakage's office. Her thoughts were quite scrambled as she wondered what she would say in response to whatever Naruto would say. It was making her head spin with all the possibilities of what could happen, and many of them scared her. What if Naruto was so angry with her that he no longer spoke to her? She even went as far as to think that he would no longer trust her, and it was hurting her inside. Oh. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. Of course it was, she reminded herself. It would be even worse if she put it off any longer. Mei left the Uzumaki compound and saw most of the shinobi were not out on the streets. Strange, she thought, as it was the shinobi district and it was commonly a busy thoroughfare for the workers and shinobi alike. In fact, it was too quiet to be the usual. Mei couldn't hear the usual animal calls from the nearby forest and could just barely register the breeze on her skin. One thought crossed her mind and it made her eyes widen in sudden recognition. An enemy genjutsu? Mei brought her hands up and focused her chakra, immediately disrupting and dispelling the strange illusion. Even with her hearing back though, the streets were still quite barren. Mei was now taking solace in the fact that the 4 chakra presences nearby remained, although they seemed to be trapped in the genjutsu as they were no longer moving. "Who are you? Show yourself." Mei ordered to the unknown adversary. She would not take kindly to an intruder in her village. "I see you saw through the genjutsu, you are a clever one." No less should be expected from the Mizukage herself, or should I say, previous Mizukage. Mei looked to her left and saw a figure emerge from the shady alley, a woman with blue hair and a single piercing below her lip. "Who are you? What do you?" Mei's eyes widened upon seeing the woman's cloak, black with red clouds. She was an Akatsuki member. "She is here for Naruto." Reacting with lightning-quick speed that even surprised Conan, Mei took out a scroll and brought out her 2 scimitar swords. She held them up in a defensive manner and dared Conan to take another step. She was further angered by the woman's passive gaze towards her. "We are not here to fight, we only wish to see Naruto Uzumaki." When she said we, Mei felt a sinking in her gut to know that more Akatsuki were there to attack. They just want to see him? I'll bet they do. I won't let them though, not when we have come so far. "I won't let you see my husband, you are only here to take Kyuubi from him and kill him for being a Jinchuriki. If you think you can walk into our village and do what you like, then you are dead wrong." Another voice spoke up, this time it was masculine, and it came from Mei's front. Someone was in front of her on the street. She turned back to see not 1 but 6 figures, all wearing Akatsuki robes and having bright orange hair. All of them seemed to have piercings of some sort and had different hairstyles, one was even bald, and his head was littered with spikes. Mei was disgusted by them all, but a creeping fear of her situation came to her upon her thoughts on tactics. Conan is right, we are not here to fight or disturb your weak village. We are here to see Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the 9 tails. If you do not wish to reveal his location to us, we will find it ourselves. I cannot promise the lives of your villagers though if you will not comply. Mei was angered by his sheer audacity, making orders and threats when they were setting foot on restricted ground. It's 7 against 1, until the Anbu can wake up, I am on my own. Mei thought with gritted teeth as she readied herself. I won't let you take Naruto, you Akatsuki are all alike. Mei felt more presences appear around her and saw not only the 4 Anbu from before, but what looked to be the entire corps arrive. They were led by the Anbu general, Ao. Upon feeling somewhat of a disturbance in the shinobi district, Ao came to investigate with what men he could gather and saw that Akatsuki had arrived. He rallied them all together and made the decision to stand by Mei in the defense. You will have to go through us as well before you touch the Uzukage. He bellowed out his challenge, leading the passive pain to sigh before readying himself for a pointless fight. Why can they not allow a god to do his work? These fools only waste my time. Yuzu Island. Mountain of Fire. Naruto was led to the top of the large mountain to find it wasn't a mountain at all, but a dormant volcano. To have no idea of its presence with its size must have meant that it was hidden somehow, no doubt by the lava monkeys. The leader walked over to the edge and waved for Naruto to come by him. He leaned over the edge and saw the magma, it was gently sloshing around, the occasional blast would bellow up and send some lava spittle up towards them. This is at Uzumaki-sama, the place where your training will be held. Of course you can see now why the training is so hazardous, but I assure you, it will make you stronger than ever before, should you succeed. We will do everything in our power to help and guide you through the process. Naruto gulped as he looked at the hot magma but nodded nonetheless. If the monkeys thought he could do it, then he wouldn't want to disappoint them. Alright then, first we need to square away your village being without their leader for some time. This training is arduous, and it is necessary for you to stay with us for possibly over a month. Yamasha noticed Naruto's face of dread and bowed in apology. I'm sorry Uzukage-sama, believe me if we could speed up the process or make it more convenient we would, but I suppose the human metaphor all good things take time would fit best here. I hope you understand. Naruto did understand, he just wasn't sure if it was possible. I understand, upon my return I will do my best to work out the arrangements. The lava monkeys seemed pleased with this, their smile infectious. But would you please begin explaining to me the process, what are the steps to this training? Of course Uzumaki-sama, first we must begin with, a loud screech came to their ears, and it caused Naruto to flinch in pain. The monkeys seemed to perk up and become serious again, their eyes glaring at some unforeseen threat. It seems our explanation will have to wait Uzumaki-sama, that was one of our lookouts. It means that there is an intruder. In your village. Naruto's eyes widened in fear as he thought of his people in danger, possibly under attack. Who could it be? Akatsuki? Kiri? It doesn't matter, I have to go. Will you follow me? I would appreciate your strength at my side if we fight. The dozen or so primates nodded and Naruto led them down the slope, his speed faster than anything that could be foreseen. Please. Just wait for me to get there. Please be safe, Mei. Land of Tea. Small town. Damn fools. Did you really think you could defeat me? Sasuke said to the dozens of dead bodies surrounding him, laughing at them even after their death. He stabbed through one shinobi's chest, piercing his body and stabbing far into the ground. He stopped moving after Sasuke pulled out his blade, and the boy shucked the blood off of the blade. He surveyed his handiwork one more time before walking over to his prize. His objective, given to him by Madara, was to capture the six tails. He was given free rein on how to get it though, something that pleased him greatly. The last known place of the wanderer was the Land of Tea, as the man was a missing nin from Kiri. Madara had the latest updates from the unaware tracking squad sent after him. Sasuke walked over the bodies of a Kiri Anbu hunter squad, struck down by his blade because they were in his way. The other bodies were a collection of white and brown vests, Kumo and Iwa shinobi alike. Because of the alliance, both countries had sent a sizable force to work together and take the six tails into custody. Sasuke easily tracked their large force, and they lead him right to the Jinchuriki. He allowed them to talk for a time, and then got bored. When he got bored, he attacked the 24 or so shinobi force and completely destroyed them. He was even able to defeat the Jinchuriki with little problems. Sasuke picked up Utakata and flung him roughly over his shoulder, having had enough of his chase and the country it was in. He was fine with doing Madara's dirty work as long as it gave him more power to strike down Naruto and Konoha, that was all he desired. Someday soon Naruto, you and I will meet. This time though, my power will surpass even Madara's, and I will kill you both. I will be the master of the Uchiha clan, I will be the last man standing. I will take everything from you, and then I will strike you down when you are begging to die. End of chapter 26. Chapter 27. War drums beat, the answer is found. Yuzu Island. Forests. Naruto was running, he was practically punishing his legs to gain speed. From what the monkeys told him, there was an intruder inside his village and he wasn't there to stop them. What about Mei? What about the civilians? He didn't have time to think, only to run. I'm never going to get there in time, I'll have to use Hiraishin. He swatted another branch out of his way and turned to look over his shoulders. The red fur of the primates behind him was easy to spot, and he was glad to see they were keeping up. There was no way they could continue as they were and get there in time, so he devised a new plan. I'm going on ahead, I'll summon you when I arrive. He didn't wait for them to acknowledge the order when he disappeared in a flash of gold. I won't let things turn out the way they did with Konoha. This time I'll stop them. Nobody is going to get hurt, that's a promise. Yamara and the others came to a stop, wondering if they heard him right. He said to wait, that he would arrive first and summon them. They glanced amongst one another, ominously awaiting the familiar tug of sorts on their bodies. When it came, they all went at the same time through the summoning to help the Uzumaki against the unknown threat. Things were not as simple as they had first assumed though, as they would soon find out upon their arrival. Uzumaki. Shinobi District. Mei stiffened her form and tightened her grip on the two scimitars in her hands, the curved handles with leather grips fitting comfortably in her hands. The Anbu around her shifted uncomfortably with the enemy's strange stance, he had his two arms up with his palms open and facing them. The other Akatsuki made sure to step back behind him before he unleashed his assault, Conan eyed him wearily. Nagato. You can't really be thinking of using that jutsu so soon? Especially when we aren't even supposed to fight. Why can't these people just move? His chakra is building up in a small sphere around him. He is preparing a technique. Ao shouted out, his hidden Byakugan was tensely observing the stoic pain as he prepared for his Shinra Tensei. We have to stop him. Don't let him use that technique. He could damage the city. A few Anbu leaped out of the crowd towards the center pane, his eyes narrowed at the untimely arrivals. I'm almost there, just a little more time. He thought as the Asura path moved in front of him and swatted two of the Anbu away with his arms, and the last one was to be impaled on the blade attached to his back. The path smirked as his inertia was going to send him right into the woman, making her unable to dodge. Sugihara gasped as she saw the man's trajectory and attempted to angle her body to avoid a fatal hit to her torso. It was useless though, he had aimed at her perfectly, and it was all over. Mei gasped and the other Anbu watched in horror as the man impacted her, sending out fluids everywhere. Then they noticed it, the fluid was white and puffy. The Asura path scowled as it slid to a stop and checked its blade to find a large log impaled on it instead. Twisting its head around, it found purchase on the roof of a building. A tall blonde man in a Jonin uniform was holding the woman in his arms. He was glaring at the Akatsuki member with nothing but hate reserved for his sight. Is that the Nine Tails? It questioned quietly, and the other pains automatically homed in on where he was looking to observe the new prey. It was too late though, for the woman was already laying safe on the roof, and all that was left of the man was a bit of dust kicked up. Mei's heart fluttered at the sight of him, but then her stomach sunk when she realized that he was playing right into their hands. Ao, despite the desperate situation, was smirking underneath his mask, a true testament to the Uzakage's ability to be able to arrive so quickly and simultaneously rescue the Anbu. I bet he could take all 7 of these guys down without us having to do a damn thing. Oh well, guess with us here it'll just be quicker. The 2 Anbu that were kicked had been sent into buildings on either side of the street. They were just beginning to climb out when a yellow flash appeared next to the Asura path and sent it flying into a building, shaking the foundation and almost collapsing in on itself. As soon as Naruto steadied himself from the kick, he had already bitten his thumb and was going through hand signs. 4 seconds since I arrived, gotta time this just right. He slammed his hand onto the ground, meaning the arrival of a summon was imminent. The familiar pop of smoke appearing was heard, but one had to look up to see the summons. At least a dozen lava monkeys stood on the rooftops of the buildings on either side of the crowded street. They were looking down on the Akatsuki with heavy glares as they immediately knew who the intruders were. Many of the Anbu switched between watching the Uzukage and the summons, unsure of what either would do next. Naruto. Get out of here, they are after the Kyuubi, you don't know. Mei tried to stop him, but it was too late as a large lava wall was suddenly erected between the Yuzu forces and their Kage. Naruto gave a faint smile to the warning as he stared at the ground in front of the Akatsuki. He appreciated his wife's concern, but this was his battle. He wouldn't let the villagers get hurt because of what was inside of him, he would deal with the intruders himself. The main path, Diva, slowly lowered its arms and the chakra used for Shinra Tensei disappeared. His ringed purple eyes bore into Naruto's blue ones and he opened his mouth to speak. Naruto Uzumaki. I have waited a very long time to see you. He said, the monotone voice somewhat unnerved Naruto, but he had to remind himself that these were the ones who killed Jiraiya. I can't underestimate them, and I can't say I'm not worried about the numbers. 7 against 1. This is gonna be a stretch. If you came looking for my tailed beast, sorry, but he's staying in my gut for a long time. You're just going to have to leave now, I won't tolerate your presence here. Naruto warned, he wasn't in the mood to deal with them after they had trespassed in his village. Diva didn't seem intimidated in the least, rather his straight face remained as he continued to speak his cryptic words. Nagato was not far from where they were, it would be a short run there if it came to that, if not, they could always drag the Jinchuriki there and make him listen. We are here to negotiate, not capture. Naruto's eyes widened at the offer, a diplomatic solution? It seemed too good to be true. No way is this guy being serious. Go through all this trouble to get here and all he wanted to do is talk? He even threatened my shinobi, there is no way he is that conceited. Diplomacy? Did you offer to negotiate with the other containers before you killed them? Huh? He spat out his words with venom, feeling the fiery vengeance thinking of Rashi, the Four Tails container. Pain thought of his words and realized something, the boy had tasted pain before. He had felt it and savored it within his heart, waiting to exploit it and take revenge. A curve came to the usually stoic face of Diva, his thoughts on humans rang true even with the supposedly pure ones. You were also Jiraiya-sama's pupil for a time, were you not? As we were both once pupils of him, you should understand that everything I do I only do to find peace. Our methods may differ, but the end result is the end of suffering in the world. Naruto's eyes widened upon hearing that the man in front of him, Jiraiya's killer, was in fact once a pupil of his. You were his pupil? How could you kill him, in cold blood? Pain shrugged, bringing Naruto's anger to boil again. He got in the way of my plan of peace, therefore I had to remove him. Naruto growled as he contemplated charging the man right now, not bothering to listen to what he had to say. Pain. Please stop this. Naruto turned his attention to the woman, a pale blue-haired beauty that had kept quiet up until now. She had moved out in front and was looking at the leader with pleading eyes. The man seemed to relax for a moment, although he was still unresponsive. She turned back towards him, extending an arm towards Naruto. He stiffened a bit in defense before he watched a piece of her coat come off and fold up like it was paper until it resembled a paper airplane. Do you remember when you last encountered one of these? Naruto began to shake his head no since he couldn't remember, but when she sent it flying towards his face that was when it hit him. It's the same one I found that night all those months ago. It gave me some sort of spoken message. Wait a second, her voice sounds familiar. Could she be the same one? That was you, wasn't it? You were trying to tell me about seeing me another time or something, right? Conan nodded, bringing her airplane back and folding it back to her body. Contrary to what your shinobi believe, we really only came here to talk. We no longer associate ourselves with Akatsuki, so to speak. Pain just has trouble articulating his point in a specific manner. Naruto nodded, not in agreement, but just to get her to keep talking, since he still wasn't buying it. You see, we wish to speak to you about. She was interrupted by the louder, masculine voice of the diva path which was glaring at her. Quiet, Conan, this is not the place to reveal all. Naruto Uzumaki, come with us, so that you may see me, the real me. Naruto didn't understand what he meant, but saw little choice in the matter. If anything, it would draw the Akatsuki away from the village and allow them to prepare. I'll be right back, I promise. Uzumaki Shinobi District. As Naruto disappeared from the scene, the lava wall slowly crumbled. The forces on the other side were surprised to find that the Akatsuki were gone, along with Naruto. Mei's heart sunk to an all-time low, and she found it hard to breathe. Tears threatened to well up in her eyes as she fell to her knees in pure shock and grief over the situation. Her husband, the Uzumaki, had just been taken by Akatsuki. Oh my god. I can't believe. We just let them go. Naruto, what happened? We gotta go after them. They took the Uzumaki, we have to go. They won't get away with this. A bellowing roar interrupted their protest, and everyone looked for its source. They found it in Yumara, the generally polite and calm lava monkey. He was disappointed in the humans before him. They were fretting over their Uzumaki without knowing the full details. You should all calm down, the Uzumaki went with them willingly. They are not here to take him, only to talk. A general look of surprise came over their faces as they scrambled to find out where the Uzumaki had gone. He shouldn't have gone alone, it could have been a trap. Ao scowled at the thought that Naruto would be so reckless and trusting. Another part of him wanted to believe he knew what he was doing. I suggest you all return to your posts, the Uzumaki will be back soon. We will see to his safety personally. The lava monkey leader, Yamusha, warned the shinobi before he led his group back into the deep forest foliage of the jungle. Mei was gently picked up by a few Anbu, still in shock and having trouble breathing to move well on her own. The hurricanes had already been dispatched to the Uzukage's residence to protect Rashi upon the news of Akatsuki and were waiting for her to arrive. Ao watched as they took the frightened woman away, surprised by how the once independent Mizukage could become so weak knowing her husband was in danger. He smiled and thought. She must really love him, there wasn't a man in Kiri that could have made her act that way. Guess Naruto was a blessing from Konoha after all. He looked around to find the Anbu waiting around for orders, some looking at him while others were talking amongst themselves. The Anbu general cleared his throat to get their attention and began issuing his orders. We are going to trust the Uzumaki on this one. Double the guard postings along the village's border and the rest disperse to your assigned guard posts. These Akatsuki may be friendly, but that doesn't mean we are out of trouble. Ao made his way to the Uzumaki tower to assert his position as temporary leader until Naruto returned, hoping the best for his leader and friend. Chijuro nodded in affirmation to Ao's orders and jumped away towards the gate with his squad. He felt very bad for Mei, his heart ached to see her in so much pain. Naruto had gotten to her first before he could admit his feelings, but knowing the innocent boy and their Uzumaki genes, Chijuro gladly gave up on his crush. Everything he had seen the two do so far just furthered his point of knowing they loved one another and he would do whatever it took to preserve their dreams of peace, no matter what the future held for him. Sugihara had recovered quickly after the Uzukage had rescued her, again. While she hated to make it a habit, it still warmed her heart to know the Uzukage had rescued her so many times. It furthered her own strength and drive to succeed and do her best for her leader and nation. After she received the general's orders, Sugihara led her squad to their original guard post, the northwestern wall section. While the events that happened in the shinobi district were well contained, a few Yuzu shinobi had noticed the events unfold. For the most, they were surprised and concerned with the sudden appearance of Akatsuki, but trusted their leader to be safe. The main force of Yuzu's shinobi corps was still at home, as missions were still a rarity due to their low notoriety. A few of Naruto's more favored squads were outside of the village and on missions assigned to them by the civilian arm of Yuzu's government. But even if the shinobi economy was slow to start, the hard-working civilians of Yuzu were able to create and export numerous materials and a few products, thanks in no small part to Yuzu's rare natural resources. Things were looking up for Yuzu, while for the rest of the world, things were only falling farther into darkness. Konohagakure. Underground. Cells. Kakashi was sitting right where they left him, right in the middle of a dirty cell dozens of feet underground. He was still locked in the tight straitjacket, and his Sharingan was locked away for good, giving him little ability to move around or see anything. It was dark, the only light source was the few candles outside of his cell that allowed him to assess his dreary surroundings with his one eye. All in all, Kakashi wasn't having a good time in jail. "Why don't they just kill me and get it over with? This is torture." He sarcastically commented to himself as he reflected on the few days he had been in the cell, just sitting and waiting. Meals came and went, still no visitors had yet to come either. The guards who were brave enough to speak to him told him that Sanada had a time planned to come and speak with him, but she never did. At first he made up excuses why she didn't come. She was delayed. A meeting must have came up. Sakura got into an argument with her. Had to go to and do something for the alliance. Today just isn't my day. She hates me. It only served to lower his morale even farther than he thought possible. It would be sad to see how the stoic and laid-back man that was Kakashi Hatake had fallen so far. All for one insignificant ideal that was being treated like dirt by the people of the village. He didn't want to be martyr for something that had no hope from the start, but he wished people would simply listen to what he had to say. The jingling of keys startled him awake from his musings and had him look towards the cell opening. A few voices could be heard farther down the hallway, where the door was to enter his cell area. One was the gruff male guard that was to be standing there 24 hours a day. He didn't really like Kakashi for some odd reason. The other was a feminine voice with a strong undertone to it, to which Kakashi immediately identified as Tsunade. "Well, she's going to start reading my rights probably. How I'm entitled to a few last words before they kill me. Geez, give me a break. Kakashi. You look horrible." He noticed that the pig-tailed woman now stood in front of his cell, her hands were on her hips, and the common scowl was plaguing her face. He looked down, somewhat feeling shameful about his appearance before looking back up at her and shrugging. Why bother apologizing anymore? He was going to die anyway. "Sorry, Hokage-sama. I don't really have much time to beauty myself with my arms in this jacket." He accentuated his point by attempting to move his arms or fingers, only for the jacket to tighten around him. Sanada sighed and crossed her arms, the once angry face was now softening. Kakashi was surprised by the change and stopped moving to see what she would say next. "Why did you do it? Give me a straight answer, Kakashi." While her visage was soft and forgiving, her tone was harsh like a practiced leader's. Despite himself and the dreary situation, Kakashi chuckled upon hearing her question. "You know Hokage-sama," he started out saying, fidgeting slightly. "I really am starting to forget the original cause of my actions with how many times that question has been asked. I'll just say what I remember. I stand by my friends, and I believe in those that have a destiny to fulfill. Naruto has a destiny to fulfill, it was obvious since before he was born. I want to help in any way I can, as long as I'm not outright attacking this village that I still love very much. All I want for this world from myself is peace, Hokage-sama, and I think Naruto is the one to do it." She looked him once over, the hazel eyes wandering his form to try and find any inkling he was lying. "So you thought you would help bring peace to the world by giving an 18-year-old the three-tailed beast? Where is the logic in that?" He just shook his head at her ignorance and continued. "We gave him the 9 tails, his parents gave him that power because they knew. They knew before any of us that he would make use of it one day. He never used it for evil, like the fox surely wanted. No, his parents' trust in him was well-founded. It is us who need to learn to trust him. He won't use the tailed beast for anything but safekeeping. He is a Jinchuriki himself. What will he do? Hand it over to Akatsuki? Send it on a warpath to Konoha just like Madara did the Nine Tails? His voice raised in volume as he spoke, his anger getting the better of him. Sanada's eyes widened at the passion in his speech. She had not been expecting that. Kakashi. Just what do you see that the rest of us can't? Sanada asked herself as she prepared to speak again when a runner arrived at the cell door. Hokage-sama. We just received news from Kumo, their expedition with Iwa to recover the Six Tails has failed. Akatsuki has taken the Jinchuriki. Their eyes widened at the fact, and Sanada was quickly advised to head to her office to prepare for an emergency meeting between Kage. She spared Kakashi one last passing glance before leaving him alone again. The man sighed as he heard the door shut, and everything returned to the boring monotony he had contented himself with the past few days. His talk with the woman was unenlightening. In fact, he didn't expect to receive any response from her. Still, with little else to do in his lonely dirt cell, Kakashi pondered what Sanada was going to say before the messenger interrupted her. Naruto. Where are you now? What are you doing? Yuzu Island. Nagato's hideaway. It wasn't long until the party of 8 arrived at a small mountain area where a natural cave had formed. Naruto noted with intrigue its relative height compared to sea level and wondered to himself why Pain chose such a strange spot to set up. The 7 Akatsuki passed him by at the cave's entrance, silently beckoning him farther in. With little choice, Naruto pressed on until he arrived in a small chamber where the 6 Pains stood in front of a figure. He couldn't make out the man, but could tell that he wasn't normal looking. The man was easily taller than the Pains that stood in front of him, somewhat blocking Naruto's view. His red hair was a dark crimson and fell over his right eye, obscuring the ringed purple iris. Naruto's eyes widened when he looked back at the one revealed eye. It was the same as Pain's. Was this man what they meant by the real me? Naruto Uzumaki, I finally see you face to face. His raspy voice sent shivers down Naruto's spine, while his unmoving gaze on Naruto made him feel small. I won't bother asking how you know my name since it is obvious, and I will just get straight to the point. What do you want here? The Pains shuffled to either side of the chamber to reveal the man in his entirety, locked to some machine, and his skeleton-thin body revealed to be jabbed into by metal rods of some sort. Naruto almost flinched and visibly recoiled at the sight of his revealed form. How could anyone allow themselves to fall so far? Was it all for his ambitions? Why would he allow himself to waste away? The man coughed and Naruto thought some of the spittle looked ruby red like blood but said nothing. Already he could tell the man was dying. Straight to the point. That is something I can appreciate. As Conan has already told you, we no longer align ourselves with Akatsuki. The ideals of what we started with have changed. I can no longer pursue their goals when they hypocritically bring the one who caused me the greatest pain of my life into our organization. Naruto racked his brain for who he could be speaking of when it hit him. Danzo? Do you mean Danzo of the Leaf? The Diva Path automatically curled its fists in anger, and Conan shifted uncomfortably, confirming Naruto's answer. I see. I'm sorry. If he acknowledged the apology, he at first made no attempt to show it. Your apologies. He coughed again and took a deep raspy breath. Will do nothing to ease our pain, only waste more time which I do not have. My name is Nagato and I have come here to tell you a few things. You will listen and perhaps you will learn something. Maybe you can even fulfill my wish by answering a question for me that even Jiraiya-sensei could not answer. Naruto took a moment to register what had been said and was shocked to hear the honorific Nagato used with Jiraiya's name. Wait. Jiraiya-sensei? That means that you were. Nagato nodded slowly in assent to his unasked question. Yes, Conan and I were once pupils of Jiraiya. As was our friend, Yuhiko. Naruto saw the blue-haired woman Conan again cringe at the name of Yuhiko and guessed that it was a sore spot. We grew up in Amagakure, orphaned by a war that was neither ours to begin with, nor our wish for to continue. The war between Konoha, Iwa, and Suna only destroyed our lives and led us to feel great pain. Have you contemplated pain before? Why it happens, what causes a human to react to it and how to stop it? Naruto just shook his head. He had never paid any attention to the feeling that he had come to know well. No. Having been a Jinchuriki, my life growing up was harsh, and I constantly felt pain, both mentally and physically. I never knew my parents though. So I suppose that in the way of feeling pain that was a blessing in disguise, am I right? Nagato seemed surprised by his answer, but nodded nonetheless. Yes. I watched my parents killed right before my very eyes by two Konoha shinobi. That was the day I unlocked my Rinnegan, and the day I became a war orphan. I killed the shinobi with my powers without realizing it. With nothing left in my village, I buried my parents and left home with no goal but to survive. I stumbled around for days with nothing but a raincoat and supplies taken from home. I even came across a dog that I at first found as a nuisance, but soon found a companion in. When I ran out of food, I felt as though there was nothing left to do but die as I collapsed onto the muddy ground in the rain. That was when Conan found me. That was when I met my first friends. Naruto glanced towards the woman to find her staring at Naruto, gauging his reaction. Yahiko was a great dreamer. He had hopes for the world that I first thought unattainable. He wanted to stop the war, just like we all did, but his dreams did not stop there. To stop the war, he believed it was necessary to become God and rule the world, and as we traveled together, I began to believe it too. One day, we were stumbling through a rocky crevice when a rain of explosive tags hit near us and scattered our party. My dog unfortunately was hit and killed, and we found the combatants to be none other than the legendary Sannin versus the tyrant of AIM, Hanzo. Naruto was surprised to hear of this. Realization dawned on him as he realized that the war was the second great shinobi war. We waited until after the battle to approach the three. Yahiko of course went first. I warned him, told him not to trust Konoha shinobi, but he said we had little choice. The pale one, Orochimaru, at first threatened to kill us. He spoke of it as ending our pitiful suffering. Jiraiya was the one to support us though and promised to stay with us for a while, saying it was the least he could do. With that in mind, we soon became a family and lived together in a modest home. It was one of the few times I actually had felt happy, in the right place. Naruto continued to listen to the man's past, the history of his pain. Nagato took a moment to breathe before continuing, his voice becoming strong again. After Yahiko was threatened by a shinobi and almost killed, Jiraiya-sensei taught us ninjutsu. All three of us excelled at it, and it was not long before he felt it was time for him to go. In the process of living with us, our master had been writing a book. It was called The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi, and it was our teacher's attempt at explaining the endless cycle of hatred and a way to stop it. He never completed it, but I thought maybe I could be the one in the book and be the one to finish the final chapter. After he left, we began to gather a group of followers with similar ideals of peace. We were the AIM gang. Naruto immediately recognized the book Nagato spoke of, actually having a copy of it in his Yuzu home's library. He dared not to interrupt the man as he continued to tell his life story. With rising power brought enemies and suspicion, the major one being Hanzo. He was a paranoid man, frightful of any who seemed close to wresting control away from him. When he found out about our group's rising popularity, he had no choice but to recognize us. While he extended a hand to shake in peace, he brought outside help, Konoha's root forces, to help him destroy us. He promised to seek peace, even allowing Yahiko to be the lead ambassador in the talks with the major nations. We were to meet at a designated time the next day, only of which Yahiko and I could go to. As we soon learned though, it was a trap. Naruto already didn't like the sound of where the story was going, and he definitely did not like this Hanzo that Nagato spoke of. We were at the meeting spot where on a higher platform of rock stood Hanzo, looking down on us with hate. To either side of him was either his loyal AIM shinobi or rude Anbu soldiers, ready to follow his orders to the letter. The worst of it though, for both me and Yahiko, was seeing Conan captured right next to the AIM village leader. He threatened us, told us that we were threats to his power, and that the only way he would let her go was if I killed Yahiko with my own hands. He even threw a kunai at my feet. I was shocked, unmoving in disbelief. Naruto again looked at Conan to see her looking at the ground in a mixture of shame and remembrance. He realized that this was Nagato's source of greatest pain. With trembling hands, I picked up the kunai and looked at my longtime friend, not knowing what to do. When I looked into his eyes, I could see a fiery determination only Yahiko, a born leader, could possess. He knew exactly what he had to do, even if he would not tell me. With an authoritative yet desperate tone, he yelled at me to kill him to save Conan. I was further confused by Conan's pleas to run away and forget about her. I didn't know what to do. His voice raised a bit too much, and he coughed more, blood coming to the edge of his lips and threatening to spill. Conan turned towards him in concern. "Nagato, please calm down. You can't overexert yourself." The red-haired man looked at her and merely shook his head, turning his attention back to Naruto. "I know, Conan, but the boy needs to hear this." I want to share my pain. So he may know and reflect what it truly means. She quieted down after that, albeit reluctantly. Yahiko always had a plan, and when he saw that I would do nothing, he took matters into his own hands. With a sudden leap towards me, he grabbed my wrist that held the kunai and plunged it deep into his chest, effectively killing himself. He whispered a few last words to me, telling me to get Conan and get away, that I was meant to do something great with my special eyes. Hanzo then attempted to betray us a second time, launching an attack on me as I held my dying friend. I was able to avoid his trap and rescue Conan, killing every last one of them, except for Hanzo himself. That is my greatest source of pain. Now that you know what results from the current cycle, can you tell me how to end it? Naruto was blown away by the question, he had never given it much thought at all. He took a moment to reflect on himself, thinking of the cycle and what it meant to him. At first, he had foolishly believed that killing Madara, seemingly the big villain in all of this, would just magically make everything go away. He knew that was wrong though, there was no simple solution like that. Killing Madara would only bring rise to another Madara, another enemy. That was when he remembered two things that had happened to him that could help solve the puzzle. He remembered the strange encounter he had with the vault room within his estate. The answer over war was love. Love came with understanding and understanding led to acceptance. The second was the name of the main character of the novel both Nagato and Naruto had read, it was his name, Naruto. Before I answer, may I guess yours? Nagato was surprised that the boy had even come up with one in such a short amount of time, but nodded anyways. You believe that through inflicting pain on the world, they will come to fear it and do away with anything that leads to death or loss. Nagato nodded, although he wasn't too impressed with how obvious it was, his moniker was pain. My answer is that I will be the one to break the cycle. The name of the main character of Jiraiya's book, what was it? Nagato thought for a moment before realization came to him. The word was whispered from his mouth with uncertainty, as if it was a fact he had overlooked. Naruto. He nodded and continued on. Jiraiya said that it was up to one of his apprentices to find a cycle of hate and end it. My father was unable to find the answer, and you yourself have given in to any alternatives in place of false peace. My answer to it is love. All those present had their eyes widen in surprise at his simple answer, one that had surprised Nagato. Love. But how can love stop hate? It will only bring hatred when the love is replaced with pain. Naruto shook his head slowly in condescension. No. True love can open your eyes to understanding and enlightenment. With that understanding of another person, no matter who they are, comes acceptance and that becomes peace. What is left to do is to spread this, not only through words, but through action as well. We cannot dwell here in caves while our enemies seek to destroy our advantage. Nagato. What will you do now? As the tables were turned on him by the blonde Kage in front of him, Nagato could only stutter in response. Kirigakure. Gates. It is time. I will finally have my time, my revenge. There is no more Jinchuriki, no Uzumaki, no Senju to get in my way. Today, I will finally crush the leaf with my own power. Madara stood at the gates of the city that had once been his now once again under his command. Dozens of shinobi stood by in attention while Sasuke himself stood side by side with Madara, his Sharingan eyes glowing red in the dark misty rain. The dozens of shinobi were not for a war, they would be annihilated in an instant, no, they were to carry Madara's real forces to the battlefield. 4 pots of varying sizes were on carts that were being towed by the shinobi. It was not that they were particularly large or heavy, it was the contents that made Madara nervously excited. 4-tailed beasts were contained in the pots, ready for transport and covered in seals to prevent them from escaping until the final moment he was ready to begin his conquest of the land of fire. I will finally have my revenge. It is a wonderful day. Sasuke, has Danzo done as I asked? The boy turned and glared at his master, nodding with a defiant look on his face. Yeah, he has sent his men to delay the Kage at their summit. Konoha will be defenseless when we strike. Madara chuckled, it turned into an evil cackle quickly as he couldn't control the butterflies in his stomach, just thinking of the destruction he would wreak upon his old home. Good. He purred out, his Sharingan twirled in excitement. Do you remember your orders? At this Sasuke smirked, hefting his sword and idly feeling the sharpened tip with his wandering fingers. Keep the Uzumaki busy. Of course I do. The masked man looked at his apprentice with a hidden smirk, one that could not be seen by the boy. Good Sasuke. Make sure that Naruto Uzumaki or his people do not interfere with Konoha. They defeated me once as I defeated them. I will not allow them to take another victory. By any means necessary, you will break Naruto, do you understand? The rain ran down Sasuke's smirking face, and Madara saw the undying look of pure happiness on the boy's visage, making him wonder if the boy had gone insane. I will make him beg to die as I butcher his family in front of his eyes. With my powerful eyes and Uchiha blood, nothing can stop me. Ha 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 ha. Madara nodded and sent the boy off, hoping he would provide a good distraction. This is your only use to me, Sasuke, as a mere puppet under my control. Hopefully you won't die too soon, I need you to stay alive just long enough. Madara looked over his shoulder and waved for the men to follow him towards the docks. It was time to begin the Fourth Shinobi War. End of chapter 27. Chapter 28. A pained god protects, one last goodbye. Yuzu Island. Nagato's hideaway. I can't believe it. Nagato expressed his disbelief as the blonde Kage in front of him waited for his response. In all honesty, he had never considered that alternative. You say that through love? That can bring understanding? But I killed her, sensei, why don't you hate me? Naruto took a few steps forward and looked Nagato right in the eyes, a fiery determination emanated from the blue orbs. I may never forgive you for what you have done to Jiraiya. But I can give you a clean slate because I understand what brought you to doing what you did. I understand what you did and I accept it. I am willing to give up on some pointless quest of revenge if it means that I can spread peace, for that is my wish for the future of this world, not only for me, but for my children and the people of this world as a whole. Nagato again was at a loss for words as the boy reinforced his fact of peace by telling him that he understood his murder and yet he accepted it because it was done for the good of all. He had listened where others had turned deaf ears. This boy. Maybe I can believe in him. Even if I can no longer believe in myself. I see now. Konan shifted her view to Nagato, shock etched into her visage as she saw one thing she thought she would never see again. Nagato was smiling. Thank you, Naruto Uzumaki. For giving me something to believe in again. Naruto smiled and put out his hand, one of which the frail man could unfortunately not shake with his own. Instead, the diva path, the one made from his dear friend Yahiko, walked forward and took Naruto's sign of peace with a smile of its own. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto was surprised when Pain began to talk and saw that Nagato was speaking in tandem with it through their link. What would you have Pain do to further this option of peace? Naruto frowned and took back his hand, instead now using it to scratch his head. In truth, while they had the idea, Naruto did not yet know how to spread it. With the world in a state of suspicion and fear and with war looming over the horizon, it would be difficult to spread the word of peace. Naruto then realized that no matter how much understanding he could give to one person, Madara and Sasuke were lost causes. While he hated to admit it, even he could not deny that the corruption of the Uchiha was absolute save for Itachi, the one man that was able to escape the self-destruction destiny by dedicating his life to his brother. The sad irony was that he was killed by that same brother who sought only power. I hate to sound contradictory, Nagato, but I'm afraid we might not be able to spare Madara or Sasuke. Both have allowed themselves to go too far and have allowed evil to swallow their hearts and minds. I fear that only an intervention by death itself could bring them down from their pedestals. The man with the ringed eyes pondered this, nodding to himself as he had also observed both of their actions as going too far. We must bring an end to them, but even with my Rinnegan, I am no match for Madara Uchiha. He has admitted to me himself that he has lost much power from his glory days, however, his skill is not one to be underestimated. Sasuke Uchiha though. I have seen him from afar, and I believe that it is time that we put an end to him. I can do this myself, his power has not yet surpassed my own, and my time will give me the chance to give one last act of good from this god. Naruto bit his lip in thought, while he had wished to be the one to kill Sasuke as he felt it was only right, he could not deny Nagato's wish to do one last act of good for the world. To this end, he nodded in assent to the man's hidden request. As you believe in me, Nagato, I shall believe in you. With your last act as God, you can redeem one man with death and save the rest of the world from his future sins. Thank you for accepting the task. I will admit to wishing to be the one to do it myself, but as I'm sure as you can tell, I have much to do myself. Nagato smiled and nodded. The boy had great potential, and it was he who had the only hope to stop Madara. He turned to Konan, who felt confused over what to do with herself. Konan. I believe this is where we part ways. Sasuke will come here, that much I am sure of, so my time will be near. I have one last wish I want you to fulfill for me. Conan's eye widened in shock to hear words she never thought would be spoken. This would be the final place where all three amorphins would be. No. I will fight with you. It was Yuhiko's. His dead stare pierced her amber eyes, silencing her desperate plea. The crimson-haired man slowly shook his head. No, Conan, Yuhiko would want you to live on and help bring peace to the world. I will lend my final hand to helping Naruto's peace and both Yuhiko, and I expect you to do the same. He coughed again, blood appeared on his lower lip as it trickled from within his body. Please, Conan. Grant my final wish as the angel of God you are. Naruto was shocked to watch as the strong woman's eyes began to tear up. The fact of separation was eating away at her, and the thought of her losing another friend must have been too much. Yes. I will, Nagato. What is it? The man coughed again before looking at the mouth of the cave. A storm was beginning to brew on the tropical island. Head for Amagakure and rouse the people. Tell them. Tell them their god finally has found something to fight for. You must help Naruto bring peace to the world. We are counting on you. He accentuated his point by having the Diva Path smile, a smile that made Conan briefly replace the corpse's face with Yuhiko's, a sudden flash of resemblance brought on by the similar words that would have been spoken by their friend. Naruto watched as Conan's tears spilled and the edges of her mouth curved in a smile, not a sad one, but a truly understanding and happy one despite her tears. She nodded and walked forward, laying a hand on Nagato's shoulder. Unspoken words were said between them with their eyes before Conan took her hand back and walked towards Diva. While he was a mere puppet to Nagato's control, Conan let herself be fooled again with that flash of resemblance with Yuhiko by hugging the body that was once her friend's for what could be the last time. It brought its arms around her and hugged back, a final goodbye between two old friends. Goodbye, Nagato, Yuhiko. Both men in question nodded as she turned to leave, only to take a longing glance towards Naruto, who had remained rooted to his spot during their goodbyes. Naruto Uzumaki. This angel will fight beside you from now on. I will go rally the people of AIM and come back here for when the final battle of this war is brought. Goodbye. With her final words said, Conan ran out of the cave and disappeared into the roaring maelstrom of wind and rain that was taking place in the early evening hours. Naruto shared a glance to Nagato to see what he would do now, a question forming in his mind. Nagato sensed it coming and looked to the boy with a bored yet inquisitive face, encouraging him to continue. What is it, boy? Naruto crossed his arms over his chest and frowned, concerned with something he heard Nagato say earlier. You said Sasuke would come here, what did you mean by that? Nagato's eyes narrowed then widened as he sought to and accomplished his remembering of the phrase, a frown set on his features as he realized the boy's legitimate concerns on the matter. Yes, Sasuke Uchiha will come here, to Yuzu. I expected that you knew this would happen, Naruto, it should come as no surprise since your last encounter with him. The boy wants to make you suffer and following Madara's train of thought, what better way to get you out of the way than by sending such a fighter as Sasuke to slow you down. It may be fate that you would fight him, but as a god, I will change that fate so that I may relinquish his curse on this world. I will protect you, your family, and your people of this island with all 7 of my bodies, including this one. Naruto was surprised by the seriousness in his tone and allowed a reassuring smile to creep onto his features. He believed in Nagato. That sounds like a plan. I have a few things to do in the village, but then after that, I will have to leave for quite some time. I hate to do it in such a hectic time, but there is some training I must attend to if I wish to defeat Madara and his plans. Will you be alright if I leave you here? Naruto explained and Nagato nodded in assent. Yes, it will be best if I remain here. To actively control these bodies I must be at a high altitude for my chakra signals to reach them. If I get any closer to your village, I will have trouble controlling all of the paths and my effectiveness will lower. I will move all 6 to an area near your village where I am sure he will start first to find you. Naruto nodded and looked at the man's 6 paths as he called them. All were staring at him with the same eyes, and it frightened him a bit. Seeing the familiar and unsettling view of the Akatsuki robes, Naruto realized his next question. Would it be alright if I could ask that you remove the Akatsuki robes from the panes? I know that you have probably worn them for a long time, but from the reception you received in the city I'm sure you can notice how people can react to the sight of them. Nagato seemed to ponder this and shrugged. Naruto watched as the panes removed their robes, leaving them only in their pants and sandals. Naruto uncharacteristically blushed at the sight of the single female body. Her perky breasts somehow caught his attention, and he looked away. It was unfortunate that he was still affected by such a simple thing, but it was in his originally timid nature that it stemmed from. "Is something the matter, Naruto-sama?" Naruto heard the toneless female pain speak and looked at her, specifically her face, and shook his head. "No. I was just thinking that if you wanted to I could supply you with vests to put on over your torsos. Just for, like from protection against the elements?" Naruto stuttered out, making the last part form as a question when he realized they were just dead bodies with no feelings. "But we have no feeling, we require no clothing. We only wear robes and our other clothing for modesty. But if you wish to supply us with flak vests, we can use them as a deterrent during our future battle." The diva path noted, and Naruto silently thanked Nagato for agreeing with him before he took out a scroll from the pocket of his own flak vest and used it to reveal 5 crimson vests of Yuzu. "You are right to only give us 5, the Asura path would not be able to wear one due to his weaponry." The diva path noted as the 5 other pains accepted the vests before quickly putting them on and zipping them up. Naruto felt weird to admit it, but it did seem interesting to have them in Yuzu uniform. It was almost as if they were his shinobi. Thankful that last annoyance was out of the way, Naruto made his way to the mouth of the cave while the 6 pains followed closely behind. He spared a final glance towards Nagato and waved goodbye and smiled to the man's simple nod in return. "Goodbye, Naruto Uzumaki, be sure to spread your word of peace and save the world from the path of hatred." Naruto leaped out of the cave and the paths fell into step behind him as he made his way back to the hidden village. Yamasha watched as Naruto left the cave with the pains all standing and intact, without any fuss at all. He smiled with the other primates as they knew their trust in Naruto was well placed and he had won the battle with Akatsuki, whether it was through fists or words. Without words, the monkeys followed Naruto back through the forest to his home so that they could collect him for the training. It could be delayed no longer, Naruto's lava training would have to begin now. Uzumaki. Uzumaki compound. Uzakage's inner estate. Mei sat on the porch bench, Rashi in her arms, watching the rain endlessly pour in front of them. Mei looked up into the sky and noted the darkening of it, leading the grimace already planted on her face to grow deeper. She was growing progressively more worried as no sign of Naruto was in sight. She was sure their home would be the first place he would head. What if he was really defeated? What if the monkeys lied about him being safe? "I have never felt so helpless until now." Was this what it felt like for Mother? She had the power to defend herself against those people, but she didn't. Feeling helpless against them as she was beaten down. If Akatsuki's goal was to weaken my resolve with this meeting, they have done a great job. As the rain seemed to intensify to an all-time high, Mei caught movement in the corner of her eye. The gate slowly opened, and there he stood, wet and soaked but safe. Naruto had returned just like she had hoped. She wanted to run to him, hug him, kiss him, hold him, but with Rashi in the rain, she was unable to do anything but stand and wait at the first step of the porch, with a relieved smile gracing her features. Naruto smiled at the sight of her, Mei Uzumaki, holding his child and waiting for him to come home. Even with their disagreement, she still loved him as much as he loved her, and nothing would ever change that. Pain had left Naruto a short while ago to hide and disperse around the Uzumaki compound to keep his eyes open for Sasuke, leaving him with privacy. With only his Kage hat to protect him from the pelting storm, Naruto made his way up the steps to stand face to face with his wonderful wife and brought a smile to his own face. The two expressed no words for a moment, a serene peace that gave them both a chance to recover from the recent ordeal. "I'm back, Mei," Naruto said, wrapping an arm around her waist as she brought her free hand up to caress his cheek. Naruto brought her in for a kiss, to which she happily received. It wasn't a quick peck though, both lovers had had enough with their decision to keep a distance from each other and relished in the other's presence. The happy squeal of their baby brought them out of lip lock and into eye contact with Rashi's big blue eyes. His smile was infectious as the parents were soon smiling back down at him. "Looks like Rashi is happy to see you too, Naruto," Mei noted as she led Naruto back into the house and away from the rain. "Be sure to take your hat and robes off, you are soaking wet," she warned him as they entered the small alcove where sandals and other accessories were deposited before entering the main home. Naruto sighed happily to hear her warm tone again, even if it was used as a scolding. He had missed it for the past few days. With all that was happening in such a short amount of time, it felt warm inside of him to know that his wife would remain a constant in his life, no matter what shortcomings would arise. As he lay his hat on the top of the coat hanger, he smiled as he knew that his duty in bringing peace would not falter as long as he had her in his heart. "Mei, would you put Rashi to bed? I want to have a few words with you." Mei had walked into the family room, just a short distance away from the nook where Naruto was at the front door, and heard his order perfectly. A chill ran down her spine at the sound of it though. He surely found out by now. He is going to scold me and doesn't want Rashi in the middle of it. I suppose I had this coming. Yes, dear. She called out, running up the stairs to Rashi's new room and placed him in his crib. At first he frowned at losing the familiar warmth of his mother's bosom, but he quieted as she lulled him to sleep with a lullaby. Nitsuhibashi Nezakai? Yuub Kanashi Yum wo Mita. Nate Hanashida. Akai mi yo. Nitsuhibashi, Nezmeu? Kieta Warashi wo Sagashiteru. Dakara Kanashi Yum wo Miru. Nitsuhibashi, Nezakai? Yuub Kanashi Yum wo Mita. Nate Hanashida. Akai mi yo. Nitsuhibashi, Nezmeu? Kieta Warashi wo Sagashiteru. Dakara Kanashi Yum wo Miru. Mei smiled softly as the little babe closed his eyes and kept them closed, allowing her to cover him with a blanket and leave the room. She straightened her robes and headed down to the family room where she felt Naruto would be. While she was nervous, even more so after Naruto's serious tone with her, Mei would not be frightened or intimidated. Naruto turned towards the opening where Mei entered the room, a small smile gracing his lips as she walked towards him. He was standing near a window, leaning on the windowsill as he watched the peaceful rain patter against it, making a soft sound that could lull him to sleep. The blonde had been thinking of what to say, but he found it difficult to think with all that had happened up until that point. Mei. Why didn't you tell me? He began his talk softly, a surprising turn for Mei who had believed he would be angry or hateful towards her. She found it much more difficult to stand her ground now. I didn't want you to risk your life needlessly anymore. I was the Mizukage Naruto. I know better than most what it means to command an army of shinobi and have the responsibility of protecting a nation weighted on your shoulders. I thought that you were powerful enough. That you didn't need something that could. She sniffed. Naruto thought he could hear her voice catch. Could kill you. Mei. Naruto sent an arm in her direction, just out of reach of her waist. That was his target. He wanted to comfort her, tell her that he would be fine, although even in his own feelings, he had doubts on the training. She took his hand and gripped it tightly with both her own, sending it to her chest where her heart was. Tears began to spill from her eyes as she could no longer take the feelings of trepidation, worry, and even doubt that had built up in her heart. This was where she would reveal it all to him and hope he would understand. I don't want to lose anyone close to me anymore, Naruto. I lost my mother, my father, my clan. Everything. With you, I finally was able to gain the love I had sought for so long and… She took a moment to stifle a sob. Naruto's eyes quivered as he listened and felt himself go weak at seeing her so broken up inside. With Rashi I now have a family of my own. If you go on this training, I'll lose you too. That was enough for Naruto, and he moved to envelope Mei in a tight embrace, not wanting to let go of her, ever. You won't lose me, Mei, I promise. She looked up from where her head had been buried in his chest and opened her mouth to retort, only to have it covered with his own. Naruto felt her sadness as he tasted her salty lips stained from tears, trying his best to take away her pain. I know I can't promise that everything will be alright like I usually do because even I can tell this will be dangerous. Really, I am probably the most insane person to even think of putting my life on the line for this. But I'm not doing it so I can gain more power. Mei quieted herself as his voice lowered to a whisper. I'm doing it. To protect you. But… Naruto pecked her lips and laid a kiss on her forehead, silently basking in just holding her in his arms. I'm going to have to fight Madara eventually, Mei. It is going to happen. I can't stop that outcome and neither can you. The only thing we can do is prepare ourselves for that inevitable so that when the time comes, we can tell ourselves that we did our best and did everything in our power to win, even if we are destined to fail anyway. It is better to do something than to do nothing, and it is even worse to know of the problem and still do nothing. Do you understand why I have to do this? Mei didn't want to understand, she wanted to say no, but she nodded anyway, because the sad truth was she knew that it was he who would have to fight Madara and put an end to it all. She just wished he didn't have to shoulder such a dangerous burden. Yes, I do, but… This time she was silenced by his own words. The whisper had turned into a confident speech as he asked her one last question. Do you trust me? He backed up a bit so that they could look into each other's eyes, and she could see that fiery passion that could make anyone believe in him, the look that made any man follow such a leader. Betraying herself, Mei allowed a smile to surface as she brought a hand to wipe away the tears. Naruto waited for her response but felt a smile tug at his own lips as she brought both her hands to his cheeks and allowed herself to get close. Yes. Yes, I do, Naruto Uzumaki. I know that you will bring us peace. And I know that you will come back to me. Naruto smiled and kissed her, allowing his passion for her to get caught up in her own emotions as she slammed her lips against his own. Mei moaned as Naruto began to win the tongue war and felt his two hands land on her lower thighs and roughly lift her into the air. Her legs quickly swung around and hooked behind his back as her arms linked around his neck. The Uzumaki could not take the sexual tension any longer. It was time to rekindle the flames that burned in their hearts for one another. In an instant, both Uzumaki were in their bedroom and Naruto brought himself down on Mei as he laid her on the bed. With a flick of his wrist, she was undressed with her white and red robe, becoming a useless piece of fabric and an obstacle to him. Naruto took a moment to look at her stunning form, the way her russet red hair scrambled everywhere on the bed with its insane length and made it look like she had an aura around her, the smooth pale white skin that he had come to love, the perky breasts that he would not trade for a single thing. Her beautiful lips, blue lips and nails that brought out the best in her, her single revealed emerald eye, seemed to sparkle under his gaze as if he was looking at a diamond. With a few tense moments, Naruto was left in nothing but boxers with his own skillful hand. Mei had nothing but a small pair of panties on. She would admit though that she had not expected Naruto to be so aggressive after they made up. She liked it though. He sat himself on the bed in front of her almost naked form, running his fingers lightly on her skin and relishing in its soft texture. Mei shivered from his ministrations, enjoying the sweet torture that he was giving her before they began. "Mei. You are so beautiful," he said, easily for the 100th time, but with no less fervor than the first. Mei blushed even then and guided his hands to her breasts, the nipples stood erect already from her excitement. "I am yours, Naruto. Please touch me more." Without any need for further invitation, Naruto grasped both breasts and squeezed them, just to tease. Mei moaned, surprising even herself with how sensitive they were. Combined with the breast milk from Rashi and how long she had gone without Naruto's touch, it was pure torture on her nerves. It was like a sweet massage for her and she relished in it, freely moaning with abandon. "Ah. It feels so good. Naruto." Knowing what his wife needed, Naruto wedged himself between her legs and brought his face to one of her breasts, gently beginning to nip and suck at the nipple. "Ah." Mei's eyes had been closed in pleasure until they shot open in surprise when she felt him bite on the sensitive spot, not enough to hurt, but enough to get an obvious squeak. His eyes were closed in pure pleasure as he enjoyed every moment of playing with his wife's wonderful breasts. He now remembered just why he had been so jealous of Rashi for the past few days. How could anyone not be with Mei's wonderful form? But he knew that no matter what kind of argument they got into, Mei would always be his. There was nothing anyone could do about that. As the warm milk came in trickles from her breasts, Naruto gladly lapped up the liquid. It didn't matter what it tasted like or where it was from, it all felt so wonderful in his bout of ecstasy. Mei for her part was relishing in the release of so much of her milk, all the breast aches were disappearing as they were replaced with pleasure from Naruto's skilled tongue. Her moans were met with no resistance as she screamed her lungs out to her heart's content. "We haven't even begun yet, and it's like this is our first time." When he felt like he had had enough, Naruto disengaged himself from her chest and looked down towards her black panties with a hungry stare. It was obvious to him as his boxers had been rubbing against her lips that she was wet, wetter than even the rain outside. Mei could barely articulate words as he sucked on her breasts. When he ripped her undergarment off and locked his lips onto her clit, there was no sound that could accurately describe her pleasure. All she could do was continue to moan and try and sound out her husband's name as encouragement to continue until her sweet release was brought on in full. Naruto sucked and licked the delicate nub that would bring his wife pleasure, relishing in her moans and how her every move was governed by which action his tongue would take. Her arms were to her sides, clutching at the bedsheets or occasionally holding her mouth to try and stop her moans from waking all of the compound. "You like that, Mei?" Naruto paused in his actions for a moment to tease his wife. The dazed look on her face was priceless as her mind tried to figure out why he stopped. "Why? Did you stop?" Her raspy voice, hoarse from moaning, escaped her blue lips only for Naruto to bring that wonderful sound back when his tongue darted into her folds and inside of her, massaging her inner walls with its coarse feel. Mei felt her end approach, it was so obvious yet it hit her like a sucker punch from Sonata. Naruto felt her legs and upper body quiver and knew what was about to happen. He took his hands that had been holding her breasts to holding her legs and brought his tongue out of her inner walls. Just as Mei thought Naruto would tease her to death, her end was again brought to the surface with one last hearty moan as Naruto attached his mouth to her clit again. He accepted her juices as they flowed from her lips and drank it all down, relishing in its taste. Mei could do nothing else but lay still on the bed, occasionally twitching as the orgasm wound down to its final spurts. It had been wonderful, quite possibly the best one she had ever had in her life. It was only fair that she did her best to return the favor. Naruto. He could just barely make out her voice from how rough it sounded, almost exactly how it had been after Rashi was born. At first he was afraid he had done too much when her legs masterfully twisted around his waist and brought his weight forward, leading his face to crash onto her breasts. They shared a moment of quiet before Naruto was again flipped onto his back, while Mei now straddled him. Not trusting herself with just how stable she would be on her own, she quickly brought her naked body close to his and crawled down his torso to where her nimble hands quickly took away his last clothing item. Naruto felt her warm lips wrap around the head of his already erect dick and knew that it wouldn't be long. Mei had always amazed him at how good she was with oral sex, nor did he ever question her ability to make him feel good. That was why, as he felt the warm suction go up and down his pole, Naruto was content to hold the back of her head and ride his way to orgasm. Mei relished in the ability to make her husband feel so good with just an extension of foreplay. Mei had always welcomed Naruto's ability to make her come, and so she felt it was time to reward him for what could be their last time in such togetherness. Naruto felt two warm and soft mounds squeeze him in between themselves, and his eyes shot open to see Mei massaging his dick with her breasts. His eyes rolled back into his skull as he lightly pressed on the back of her head to make her speed up, to which she complied. He had never received a boob job from Mei. It came as a great shock, but a pleasurable feeling. It was as if Kami knew the grave stakes Naruto and his family were about to face and gave him one last gift of pleasure, a sign maybe of good luck. That was in the back of Naruto's mind though, as through a combination of his wife's gentle sucking on his head to the massage of the rest of his pole, Naruto's end was already arriving. Mei had been happily drinking his pre-cum when it finally occurred to her that with her new technique underway, she was making Naruto come in half the time. She knew as his head lightly shook while in her mouth that his end was near and sped up, hoping to bring him to the same level of ecstasy as he did for her. It came as relief for both when Naruto's seed shot into her mouth and she gladly drank it all, not missing a single drop. With his own orgasm ending, Naruto brought back his control and flipped Mei onto her back. With one quick motion, Naruto was poised to enter Mei's folds with just her whim as his command. He looked into her eyes as did she into his, a silent message to begin. Naruto uttered 3 words as he slid into her, 3 words that could make or break a person, 3 words that Mei had begun to treasure since her time with him began. I love you. His rhythm was a fast one, even though it had the same amount of passion as a slow beginning would have. With ease, Mei found her niche and began to slam back onto him with her own body. She would tighten around him, and he would push harder to keep up his rhythm. She slowed down, and he would speed up to pick up the tempo. It was quick for her mind to realize that there was no way she could keep up and just allowed her moans to keep him going as she grabbed onto the bedsheets again. With their movement and his position, Naruto had a perfect view of Mei's wonderful mounds bouncing back and forth. It was as if they were teasing him that his job had not been good enough to first time and they were enticing him to come back. Not one to be outdone and definitely not one to skimp on pleasuring his wife, Naruto leaned down and began to suck on her breasts. If Mei had been holding it together before then, she was now melted putty in his hands. With her end apparent, Naruto sped up his movements and made them even more forceful. His hands weren't idle as one gripped her other breast and the other held onto her hips to steady them as he slammed into her. Mei couldn't take it anymore as she screamed out his name in unfathomable pleasure. Naruto. Naruto felt his own end arrive with her final squeeze and took his lips away from her punished breast, joining in her moans. Mei. Naruto's seed mixed with Mei's juices and they coalesced within her body, an unprecedented feeling between the two lovers could be felt upon the end of their orgasm. With his body and mind spent, Naruto covered up Mei and thought of how he too should join her in post-coital bliss. He knew he couldn't though, not tonight. Mei seemed to understand as she moved a weak hand to lay over his own, making his eyes meet hers. With an almost imperceptible nod, Naruto received her blessings, her understanding, and her love for his training that he would soon set out to do. Mei. Naruto couldn't bring words to describe how beautiful she looked, even with the sweaty sheen that made her glisten in the moonlight that shone through the windows. Naruto absently noted the rain had not let up, too caught up in his wife to worry about such trivial things. I know, Naruto. Good luck. I love you. Naruto kissed his wife's lips and slowly got off of the bed. Within a few minutes his clothing was back on and he was ready to leave. He spared a final look behind him and felt confidence surge through him as a tired Mei smiled at him. Go on. You have one last leg of training to do, my love. You are Uzumaki, I know you can do it. Naruto remembered when Mei said the exact same words of confidence before he began his training with her all those years ago in Kiri. Only she and him would ever be able to share that nostalgic feeling through the memory. I love you, Mei. I'll be back soon. Naruto opened the balcony door and stepped out into the pouring rain before leaping out into the air and disappearing in a yellow flash. Mei waited for a moment even after he left to make sure she saw him off well. He needed her trust now more than ever, and she would gladly give it to him if it meant he would survive that training. Satisfied that her husband would return to her soon, Mei fell into a deep sleep. Uzumaki. Uzumaki compound. Sasuke removed his blade from the gut of another bodyguard that was hiding within the grounds of the Uzumaki compound. He had arrived a short while ago and had easily gained access to the village. While he had the urge to kill anyone who got in his way, Sasuke kept his bloodlust from rising long enough to get in range of the supposed Uzukage mansion. Another guard arrived in front of him. This time they had a pitiful swirl mask that looked just like Madara's. He could feel the hate radiate off of the man as he prepared to avenge the fallen shinobi and smirked, relishing in the rain that was pelting his skin in the dead of night. With the rain, it was easy for him to kill, and no one would discern the dying screams from the rain that so gently lulled them back to sleep. He electrically charged his sword and activated his Mangekyo, preparing to destroy the man in front of him with Tsukiyomi. Before he could even begin though, the man fell to the ground in a muddy heap, unconscious. As Sasuke began to bring the sword down on the man, a long metal rod clanged against it and stopped his advance cold. Sasuke's red and black eyes looked up into purple ringed ones, the deathly gaze set on by the one with the Rinnegan frightened Sasuke for a moment. He leaped back a bit and saw it was Pain, the Akatsuki member that Madara surmised had gone rogue. He had not been expecting him to be in Yuzu of all places. Pain. What the hell are you doing? Get out of my way and go bother someone else. The diva path remained near the man's body, stalwart and unmoving, even after Sasuke's angry order. Did you hear him? The time for you to die has come, boy. Your taint on this world will be vanquished by me, and it will become my last gift to this world as I entrust it to the next generation. Sasuke squinted in confusion to the man's cryptic words as he saw another Pain pick up both bodies of the men and take them off somewhere. It was not long before all six paths stood before Sasuke glaring at him. You're not making any sense. If you threaten me again, I won't hesitate to kill you and destroy those eyes of yours. Pain was not fazed by the petty insult, merely allowing his final words to Sasuke flow through the air with a final tone. This god has spoken. Your time has come. Mount Myoboku. Land of Toads. Four figures stood around a large crystal ball. One was sitting on a large cushion and had his webbed hands hovering over the ball. His old and decrepit form belied his true power. The great toad sage held a neutral expression on his face as the party watched Pain confront Sasuke. Quite an interesting change of events, Ajiji-sama? Fukasaku noted as he sat next to his wife Shima and the large hulking figure to the other side of him. The old toad nodded, his wizened mind analyzing the situation in Uzumaki. They had been sitting here watching the crystal ball for days, even weeks, barely eating anything at all as it would disrupt their silent vigil of the world around them. Yes, Fukasaku, that Naruto-chan is quite an interesting one. I wonder if the monkey's training will be as equal of an advantage of our sage training? Fukasaku shrugged, no human had ever completed it so it was hard to tell. Well, the last time I saw Yamusha we both were about at equal strength, even when we began to use our special training. I figure Naruto-chan has a good chance of becoming strong, as long as he is in their care. Shima was sitting quietly, watching the drama unfold between Sasuke and Pain, instead of bickering over useless things. I suppose with the rallying of Madara's forces and the trouble Leaf is about to be in, it is just about time we showed ourselves, Jiraiya boy. The fourth presence sitting near the crystal ball was finally acknowledged as Jiraiya, the human toad sage. The white-haired man smirked as he watched his previous apprentice prepare to go up against Sasuke, weighing their options. It looks like it is really about to hit the fan in Konoha. I guess I should make a good appearance with the toads, huh? Fukasaku chuckled at Jiraiya and waggled his finger at him. Good thing for you that Sanada-chan isn't there, or else she would kill you for hiding from everyone this long. Jiraiya frowned and scratched the back of his head, meekly pointing over to the great toad sage. Well, it's not my fault this guy said I should stay hidden from the world so peace would come. I was just doing what he said to do. The old geezer smiled. Let's see them believe that in Konoha. Fukasaku muttered as Shima laughed and pointed at the cowering Jiraiya to give him her own jibe. Sanada-chan will believe it. After she gives you a couple dozen hits on the head. End of chapter 28.